it's okay to succumb to being too tired, being overwhelmed, being too stressed, thinking you're getting sick. Like those are all good. Oftentimes, athletes' best weeks are the ones where they skipped a workout. Today wasn't worth it. Today wasn't worth the next 4 days, because they don't want to dig a hole so deep it's going to take 2 weeks to get out of, versus missing 1 day and being able to bounce back 2 days later. You don't get points for working out when you feel terrible.
You asked if I'm ready to roll, and the answer is yes, buddy.
The answer is unequivocally yes, I am.
I'm ready to roll.
Ready to roll, and we are rolling into podcast 311.
311.
Yeah, well, no, speaking of 311, that was one of my favorite bands back in the 90s.
Really?
Yeah, I was a big 311 guy. All the kids in the neighborhood, they were big 311 fans, and I was like, what is this? What is this music I'm listening to? And I was actually a pretty big fan back in the 90s, but I was young.
That like a Blink 82 thing? 182?
Yeah,
like
I wouldn't say it. They were it's definitely
Were you ever into boy bands?
Have you never? No, never.
Boys to Men?
ABC, BBD, the East Coast Family? Yes, I was definitely.
Oh, Belle Biv, man.
Yeah, Belle Biv. You can't consider Boys to Men a boy band.
It's in the title, man.
I would consider them a mansemble.
Mansemble.
They were. I just totally made that up too.
That's not bad at all, man. They're still kicking it.
They were straight men. If you look at like Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, like those were legit, premature adolescent boy bands.
Yeah.
But anyway, back on track. Welcome.
Wow. Come on, man. I was into the Bee Gees. Is that a boy band?
No.
Okay.
No, we'll let them slide for sure. This was anything pre Backstreet Boys or NSYNC was definitely not a boy band, because they were men. Boys to Men, as they tell you in the title, called themselves. They were men. They were boys to men.
I got you. Yeah. Well, my drop of Bee Gees is a subtle hint that I enjoy coaching older people.
Oh my God! It's a quick story. I think I've told you this before, but speaking of like back in like the 80s, 90s, and the Boys to Men era, one of my very first run-ins ever with any kind of person who had like celebrity status was back like when we lived in Nashville. Obviously, growing up, I swam year round for NAC, and we had our swim sessions and practices after school at the Maryland Farms Country Club. And it was like now it's the YMCA, but it was a pretty like fancy schmancy type place. And I'm walking out one day from practice, and we're walking up the stairs, and walks by the tandem, the duo, Milli Vanilli.
I was just gonna say it. Duh.
Milli Vanilli, man. And this was pre obviously the whole lip syncing.
They were still huge.
They were massive.
So massive.
And then I think a few weeks, no, maybe not a few weeks, but maybe a summer or two later, we were doing there was like this same place at Maryland Farms. They were doing like some kind of raffle or win. I had a choice. I won tickets, and I got to pick, and it was a tough one. But remember this, I'm like 6th, 7th grade here. Okay, so don't judge me on who I was then. And it was to go to Starwood Amphitheater, and I could either see the Beach Boys. Yeah, or crisscross.
Oh, you went backward pant.
I totally went crisscross. I'm not gonna lie, man. I went crisscross and I went backwards pants, and I thought I was the coolest thing. I met with Ben Young and Ben Brown, two of my best friends back in the day. Sat on the lawn at Starwood Amphitheater here in Nashville with their pants backwards.
Oh, man. Well, first of all, did Milli Vanilli swim at the?
I don't know. I think they were in town.
They just sat in the
they probably
recliners.
They probably just sat back in the lounge
chairs.
Yeah, I'm not sure what they were doing there, but I remember being like, "Man, wow, this is them. This is Milli Vanilli with their dreadlocks down to like their
I met
waist."
One of those dudes in the club. Yeah.
Oh, in the club.
It was in Indianapolis. Yeah, North Side.
Wow,
it was weird. That was right before the news broke.
Oh.
So, I think he was feeling the heat.
You think he might have been? Hey, listen, you know it's going to come out at some point.
Yeah, you can't hide that, man.
You can't hide that. But
anyway,
hey, you can't hide the fact that obviously this is in fact the triathlon related podcast. But as you know, if you've listened, any of you know that we cover all things life, triathlon. We generally just try to have a lighthearted, open discussion on what's going on in our personal lives as coaches and athletes, what's going on in some of our athletes' lives. We tend to also intertwine what's going on in the triathlon world professionally. Like I know today, I'll definitely want to chat about this coming weekend. Obviously, you've got Ironman Louisville, which is a big event, but then you've also got the Kona Ironman World Championships, which is huge. Yeah, it's semi-big. We'll be in Louisville, so it's kind of just as big, but we'll be talking about that a little bit today. I want to give a couple predictions, which we always do, and it's going to be a loaded race. But anyway, we'll talk about that. But yeah, if you haven't listened, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it. We'd love to hear more of your 80s, 90s rock band stories and what you think about boy bands in general. Having said that, episode 311. We come to you twice a week, 3 years. Keep coming back, and we'll do our best to give you some good takeaways today. And again, appreciate you listening.
Yeah, we do. All right, thank you.
Hey, welcome. You got any topics today? Because I wouldn't say we got off track because we're generally on track. But
the one I thought about is, remember when we were at Chattanooga and we were walking back to the car and we were talking about the discipline and just what it takes to actually stay at a high level. And I thought maybe that could spin into our Kona discussion, because we were talking about the highest level professional athletes in this sport and really what it takes, because there's obviously to go to Kona every year and perform well, like we have no idea really what that takes, what level some of these people are at. But as we were talking about, sort of things like how do they hold on to the top, these Sebastian Kienle, Patrick Lang guys, and how do they stay there, because there's always young guns coming for them, and there's always younger legs. Mm-hmm. And then but these veterans that can just hold on, that can stay right to the top. I don't know if that's a good topic or not, but it's interesting for age groupers as well.
I think it's a fun topic, because I think it was you and I had a great conversation. But we were walking back to the car, right, from a long day of spectating Ironman Chattanooga, and we were just talking about, because I think, and again, like I think I brought this up in my conversation with you in the parking lot, was that, like, I think a lot of times people think of the Olympics, right, as like this, mm-hmm. as this spectacle of the one day and the pressure of 4 years, and I'm totally behind that. I totally get it. I totally support that kind of belief and thought process behind the enormity that is something as short as like the 50-meter free at the Olympics. Like, you've trained for 4 years and you've basically got 17 seconds to live your dream. But on the flip side, as you can place a lot of weight behind that, but then you and I got to talking, it's like, yeah, but and I get it, because it's a lot of weight on a small, like, milliseconds of what's going to define you between a gold medal and like seventh. Like you could be seventh out of the eight in your heat in the finals in the Olympics, and be like milliseconds away from standing on the podium and hearing your own country's national anthem played. So I get it to that extent. But on the other extent, as we were talking with like athletes like Patrick Lang and Alfredino, Daniela Reef, who is just like dominated, is, I think, the longer the day, the more fascinating it becomes, because so many things can go wrong. And I think that's just such one of the things about triathlon that I think is underrated, when people think that you can just do things and I can just show up and do it. But there are so many things that can go wrong, and so many elements that can always change. The terrain is always different. The course is always different. The wind, how you're feeling. There could be mechanical issues, and obviously the professional race is significantly different than. And the tactics they use are significantly different than what age groupers do. But I think one of the more fascinating parts is not just how athletes show up on this one specific day and can just dominate. I mean, obviously, I think, to be fair, like Patrick Lang, he's been kind of jabbed a little bit the last 2 years because he's been accused of, and I think other professionals have also kind of slightly accused him of having like the domestique route because he's sponsored by a team, and he'll basically just sit behind some of his quote unquote teammates and not do a lot of work, and then be fresh as daisy to run his way to first. More power to you if it's free, if it's free, if it's fair and it's legal. But I think that, yeah, the one-day element of the dedication and the commitment and the precision you have to have on race day to execute the perfect race to win a world championship, I think is one thing. On the other hand, I think because a lot of people talk about like if it's your first year in Kona, they basically will say you're not going to win.
I know.
No matter who you are, you're not going to win. You don't know how to handle the day. You don't know how to handle the heat. You don't know how to handle the taxes. They say it's a totally different race and totally different conditions that you've ever had before.
And the pressure.
And I think that I do. And I think that while that is 100% true, I also think that again, being able to execute on one day is one thing. But I also think, and this is also the same way that you see with age group athletes that are really, really successful, is when you figure it out on race day, what you've also probably more than likely figured out is how you got to race day. So you'll see a lot of athletes so David McNamee is a good example. He's been on the podium, I think, the last 2 years and ran his way to one of the top 2 or 3 fastest marathons in the day. Basically, he was basically an unheard of kind of guy, and he will basically say like, I position myself to just race on this one day the entire year, not 8 or 7 races beforehand. So I think that while yes, the execution on that day and the attention to detail is on a different level, I think also what athletes learn that they're probably not willing to share is how I need to structure my season so I can be prepared to, while every day probably isn't perfect, to where I can be in the best position to mitigate any losses that might be thrown my way with mechanicals or bad swims and so on and so forth. So I think it's so fascinating to watch these guys show up, where you got guys like Jan Frodeno, Patrick Lang, Dave McNamee, Kienle, who haven't raced in a few weeks or a few months, really been kind of off the radar, focusing on just this one day and putting all their eggs in one basket, which again, like you said, the amount of pressure that puts behind them is enormous.
Yeah.
Just because they don't have a chance to let up. Then you got a guy like Cam Worth who raced an Ironman like 2 weeks ago and just absolutely demolished people. And he's stepping in and he'll be a huge player. I wouldn't be shocked to see him in the top 5 to 7. And so, I think some of the things you can take away from people like that are obviously, the first and foremost thing is, if you ever watched any interview ever with Sebastian Kienle, he is one of the most thoughtful athletes thoughtful professional athletes you're ever going to talk to, and talking about his equipment choices, why he does things, why he doesn't do things. And obviously that is a element that age groupers tend to not take. But yeah, on a smaller scale, which is us, which is the age group athletes, the back of the pack, the middle of the pack, and the front of the pack, that there's so much, I think, to be taken away from how they carry themselves and how they approach their training. And most of them will tell you that, that you can't prove your fitness during training. You need to prove your fitness on race day. And again, that's one of most age group athletes' biggest pitfalls.
What's interesting about that concept of training with focus only on Kona, and how it maybe relates to me, is like I did this year. I was totally focused on Wisconsin, and I did the Chat 70.3 in May, but other than that, I didn't do any races. I was just like all in on this one race, and it didn't pay off for me necessarily. I mean, that's always going to be debatable, but the point is like at that level, with the highest level pros, that, like as you said, they learn along the way and whatever it takes, but how they must, that there's really no substitute for racing in that regard, because you can sort of do your training and whatever, but I gotta believe they have to put in like super testy kind of training. Like maybe they're training with somebody, or like, in other words, maybe like sparring would be in boxing, something that kind of has to really give the same intensity or feel, at least with the pressure level or something like that. There's got to be a lot more of that going on than I would realize. Maybe training with, people that are pushing them or whatever the case is,
Yeah, I think a lot of them do team up with other athletes that are around their ability. Obviously, not like their immediate nemesis, I would say, which is actually common to pair up in squads. Like Joe Filio has a squad that has a bunch of male and females in the ITU circuit that are all uber competitive, and you'll often see like guys on the same team on the same podium, in ITU races and being on the same team. So you have that aspect. But then, I think one of the things that they do that athletes probably can't mirror, but when it comes to comparison and when it comes to looking at other age group athletes, and we kind of touch on this a lot, and I was kind of going through this with another athlete earlier this week, is that these last like 2 to 3 to 6 to 8 to 10 weeks before these professionals do their big Kona build up for their biggest race of the year, most of them hunker down and trim the fat and lessen the noise. And what I mean by that is they do their best to remove all stress. Many of them will leave where they live and they're located with their family and go to what they would call like a mini camp with either other people that their coaches have as well. Like I know some will go to the Woodlands in Texas. I know Tim O'Donnell and Miranda Carefree will go to Lawrence in Kansas. Some people go to Tempe, Arizona. Some people go out to Kona like a month early, and they'll have basically to train in those conditions, but also so they can just basically remove any stress. They're not going to have their kids around. They can focus on one thing. And I think obviously that's a benefit that they have that most age groupers don't. But I think that, again, like when you try to compare yourself, which is what so many age group athletes do, like you go to a race and you see somebody at the same time and you're like, why can't I beat this person? Or I want to be as fast as them. And then you look at your personal professional life and you realize that it couldn't be any different. That's what I was trying to explain to an athlete earlier this week, is there's basically three P's that lead to performance in terms of stress: physical, professional, and personal. And all three of those kind of areas of your life affect your performance. Physical, obviously, being your health, your fitness, your ability to improve that fitness, your consistency. Personal would include relationships, good or bad relationships in your life. If you're married, not married, going through a divorce, getting into a great relationship. How's your own personal life? Then obviously professional life is, because I've seen so many times like jobs basically can ruin people and ruin athletes and ruin their years, where they having to move, are they losing their job, are they getting a new job? Because again, like people always assume stress is bad. Like it's always associated with something very negative. Mm-hmm. But you can get into like a brand new relationship that you're really excited about, or start a brand new job that you're in love with, that you got a new promotion but the thing is now all of your brain power is on that, and it's stress. And so again, stress is stress. But so when you look at like the global stress amount or points that an athlete personally can accumulate, obviously they're going to undulate between personal, professional, and physical, but they all affect each other. And what professionals do is they basically take personal and professional. Obviously their professional is different because it is physical, but they basically trim away and limit every stress they can possibly have that's outside, that's going to affect the amount of stress they can handle to prepare for this one day. And I just think it's a great lesson in just being objective and looking at your life and thinking, and this is one of the things I really try to stress when I work with athletes, is that like you have to coach the person first. You can't coach the athlete, because if you're coaching just the athlete, you're only coaching what you know or what you expect they can do swim, bike, run wise. If you don't know that or if you don't take into account their personal life, if they have kids, they don't have kids, their kids super busy, what kind of shifts do they work? Like all those different things, that all applies to who they are, because that's who they are on a day-to-day basis. They're only an athlete the hour and a half of the day you ask them to be. The rest of the 22 and a half hours a day, they're a human. They're a person that have outside stressors and outside things to take care of. And again, that's the amount of detail that some of these higher end age group athletes can do, is basically say, I was reading like one of the Slow Twitch main articles on Jocelyn or Jacqueline McCall. I'm totally brutalizing her name right now, but she was the athlete who took Danielle Reeve to the wire in Texas. And I think she lives in Colorado or Boise, Idaho, or somewhere. Anyway, I'm butchering the whole thing. Anyway,
yeah.
To get to the point of it is she's been in the woodlands for the past couple of weeks, away from family, away from her kids and her husband, just focusing on this one day. Is the focus on acclimating and getting prepared for the heat by being in Texas in a brutal time of year? Sure. But you're also limiting the amount of outsides. You can just focus on you. And so again, like when it comes to like dedicating your life to these things, you have to be careful on comparing yourself to other people, and kind of like we talked about on Monday in a not so triathlon podcast, what was to understand and be okay with what season of life you're in, and that's how you should dictate and look at things in terms of how well you want to do and how well you can do, given where your life is. And professionals have the ability to just basically not do any of that or limit it. But I still that's why, like you see Danielle Reeve, like you never hear about her being in a relationship. She doesn't have any kids. She basically trains. This is her job 24/7. That is it. And then you got other athletes who are kind of on the fringe. You see some of them that are married who have kids, and it's interesting to watch like the ebb and flow of how their fitness and performances go as they go in and out of relationships or have children, and how that affects everything. And I think it's a good reminder for us all that we do this for fun. We do it as a hobby, and while we can be dedicated on our own level and take some of those attributes and those really admirable levels of commitment and follow through and consistency that professionals have and top and age groupers have, what we also have to understand is once we kind of put them all in a pot with our own personal and professional stressors and good things and bad things, that things can then the ultimate product of that recipe is going to look drastically different.
Maybe I think you just talked me into going to Wisconsin a month early next time and riding the course,
get acclimated to the course,
acclimated to the weather, riding the course, just being in my zone, focused on one thing. Or maybe not.
Or not.
Sounds like
or
a good
just
idea. What you're talking about too, I think a lot is, especially if they do these mini camps or whatever. But I think the one thing that, it's kind of a buzzword right now, but the whole idea of being active with recovery is such a huge thing. I'm sure that they're, you talked about it before. A lot of them have personal, massage therapists and the whole 9 yards, and they're really working that hard. I heard an interview actually last night with Evander Holyfield on Rogan, and it was I can't recommend it enough. The dude is unbelievable. He's like 70, and he just like totally looks great and sounds great, and he's super dialed in. But he was talking about how he would train back in the day, and he said recovery was everything for him. He might do 3 workouts in a day, like one more intense than others, and usually it was big that he would do a short workout on when he was super fatigued and then just recover hard. It was sort of like just build that fitness while you're just fatigued, like we always talk about and everything like that. But it was funny because he was talking about, remember the fight when Tyson bit his ear, of course?
Oh yeah, I was watching it.
He was talking about that, and he said, man, he goes, I was so mad, like I just was ready to bite him back, and he got pulled to the corner, and of course they broke things up, and he calmed down. He said he leveled out because he was so focused on winning that he let go of it. He actually said he forgave him in that moment, and genuinely forgave him. And then he came back to the locker room after the fight, and his whole camp was just furious, and they wanted to go out and punch him and beat him up or whatever. And he said, why are you guys mad? He didn't bite you, he bit me. He goes, I forgave him. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. And then he said like a week later or something, they were at a NBA All-Star game or whatever, and they happened to be staying in the same hotel, and they didn't realize it, but they came out and were both waiting for the elevator at the same time, and they hadn't talked to each other since the fight. And he said, Tyson looked at me and said, are we good? He goes, yeah, we're good. And they got in the elevator. When they got off in the lobby, they both came out. I mean, that was like the hugest fight, of the decade probably. And they both walked off the elevator together. I just thought that was really funny. But yeah, he was real level on letting stuff go and being kind of just completely focused on what the goal was, and the little things along the way that, make up the outcome. Instead of focusing on the outcome, he's really just in the moment. So that was really a interesting thing, and I think it really does apply to what we do as far as long-term goals and how little things make the difference, and recovery is a huge part of that for pros, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like that's again, like I think, and this kind of goes back to it was a great piggyback off the stress thing, is that because stress is energy, right? It's like it's good energy and it's bad energy, and it's what it's taken in your mind. I thought it's very fascinating to hear him say he forgave him in the moment, because if he was going to waste any energy or any focus on that year or being mad at him, it was going to take away from his ultimate goal. Mm-hmm. And I think that as age groupers, like again, like so many athletes just don't think about that, and again, don't understand how to mitigate that throughout the weeks or throughout races to set themselves up for success. And again, like it's okay to succumb to being too tired, being overwhelmed, being too stressed, thinking you're getting sick. Like those are all good. Like I made a comment in Training Peaks earlier this week, and I told an athlete, I said, oftentimes athletes' best weeks are the ones where they skip the workout. And it's not because they're being lazy, or because it was because they said, if I dig a hole today, it's going to be too big of a hole to get out of the next 3 to 4 days. Because obviously, like if the load is appropriate, you should be able to train every single day. The load should be appropriate. You should be able to handle the stress to sleep, wake up, bounce back. Obviously, you shouldn't feel like super 100% fresh every day, but you should be able to get back to work. But a lot of athletes that are smart and objective and sometimes have had bad experiences can say, today wasn't worth it. Today wasn't worth the next 4 days, because they don't want to dig a hole so deep it's going to take 2 weeks to get out of, versus missing 1 day and being able to bounce back 2 days later. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to hearing what he said about letting that go in that moment, is I think on the flip side, as athletes, what most middle of the pack age groupers in front of the pack that are so obsessed with always getting a workout in, that's also a huge fat negative, because you will do the workout no matter what. You will drive yourself into the ground no matter what. You don't get points for working out when you feel terrible. You just don't. And most athletes will dig themselves in a hole. They won't abide by the rules that you should apply to yourself in terms of being rested, showing yourself a little bit of grace, having good recovery habits. And I mean, I'm sure pros deal with the same thing, because they have that mindset of, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. I always think it's interesting when like Cody Beals, who will be racing in Kona his first time, he writes articles and he's like, I can always tell when I'm overtraining. He made a list of things about his sleep or his sex drive or his weight, and obviously he's gone through ebbs and flows in his professional career where he's noticed what kind of some of his triggers are. And so I think that as age group athletes, you've got to be aware, either very, very, very self-aware and very objective, and have a good head on your shoulders to be able to adjust and manipulate your training schedule and be okay taking days off. Or you need to have a coach or a training plan that is suited best for you, or just to have someone to text, say, hey, I'm not feeling that good today, what should I do? Because most athletes know the answer. Like most athletes, when they text me, hey, coach, I'm not feeling very well, or I skipped this bike today, should I make it up next week? They already know the answer, but they're texting you and asking you because not because you are going to have some like mind-blowing adjustment to their training, but they're asking you because they want you to tell them that it's okay to skip a day, that it's okay to listen to your body, that it's okay to miss something, and you're not going to lose all your fitness and go back to zero. They're looking to show themselves grace through your answer. And I have to imagine that is a incredibly hard thing for professionals to do, even though professionals have coaches just like age group athletes do, is to have like a watchful eye in helping you guide that journey of when to and when not to. And then the biggest thing obviously is allowing yourself to be okay when you don't. And I've got to imagine that professionals are really, really good at that because they've probably seen the benefits of it, but they've also probably seen as being professionals and this is how they make their living. They've probably seen also themselves of just digging themselves such a massive hole that it takes weeks or months to even get out of.
Yeah, I mean, there's such a fine line between pushing it and digging that hole, man. And I think that probably is one of the things you're the best at, is being able to pinpoint that and look at that and keep somebody on because, well, at the pro level it's even a finer line, and at our level, what benefit is there even from approaching that hole, really? If you think about it. I mean, it's like if you're getting on the edge, that's great. I mean, that's just so difficult, with, like you're saying, personal life and the jobs and all the stuff going on in our lives. I mean, I've really been, since Wisconsin, I've really been kind of getting fascinated by this whole idea of recovery within workouts. Like I've been trying to keep my run going, and I've been doing walk runs, and it's really kind of changed the way I'm approaching everything, because I think that I have a tendency naturally to not recover as much or take easy enough off the intervals and things like that. And just this whole idea of building or holding on to my fitness, with kind of a level-headed mindset is just a big deal. And I just think we're always walking that line, between being totally exhausted and trying to get better. So, it's really an interesting topic, man. I mean, the triathlon lifestyle is not for the meek usually, and it's because we like to push ourselves and we like to do hard things, and we like to, because we know that is what keeps us alive. But it's so easy to, fall off that ledge, I think.
Yeah, and I think, again, like one of the more underestimated aspects that, again, like this time of year is so important is we talk about like physical dedication, like the focus and the commitment you have to be consistent, and what pros and top end age groupers have right now when it comes to putting this gigantic amount of volume and pressure onto one race day, is that not only do they need time to unload from, because you'll see a lot of like professionals after this, they'll like hop on their mountain bike or their cross bike, gravel bike, they'll do trail run, they'll do anything that's just super flexible and very relaxed. And yes, do their bodies need time to recover? Absolutely, because they've probably dug themselves one of their biggest holes in the entire year, if not their biggest hole, to go into this one big day for them, which is the World Championships, and they need time to recover. But also, I think the amount of the emotional and mental focus, because that's why I think a lot of age groupers struggle and tend to not have breakthrough years, or tend to not see themselves progressing year after year after year, is not because maybe training is bad, but because they don't take enough downtime. Not just, again, to physically repair, but you can't stay, not mostly you can't, you shouldn't put your mind through physically and emotionally adhering to 100% structure and rigidity all the time, because eventually you're going to wear thin. You have to be relaxed. You have, at some certain times, you have to let your whole body and your whole mind wind down, or at some point you're going to crack. It's either going to be your mind, it's either going to be your soul of the sport that you came to because you love it, or it's going to be physically. And again, like that's the kind of the triple-edged sword of recovery, is mental, emotional, and physical recovery. Yeah. Is taking those times to be super flexible and having choice days, and having a purpose is fine, but sometimes that purpose needs to be letting yourself relax a little bit, and I don't want to say let your guard down, but you see what I'm saying? Like, in terms of like just letting things go and being okay with where things are, and not feeling like you have to rush yourself back or you're going to lose it all.
Yeah, man. I think that's really the the nexus of my walk and run lately. Is this? It's a microcosm of the whole thing where, excuse me, I'm doing 1 minute walk with a 3 minute on, and there is something super magical about this idea. Like, I'm going to be done, like 15 times within that run. It's kind of like it breaks up the whole run, and it's sort of like breaking up the season with like, yeah, I have an off day, or yeah, I have an easy thing tomorrow that I really am going to enjoy, and I don't have to be on all the time, because I think that's the illusion with training for Ironman or any kind of long distance race or any race, is that like I was thinking about like how I felt during that marathon, and it just was such a negative feeling. Like I got to keep doing this over and over and over and over again. And sometimes when I'm out running and I decide like, hey, I'm going to walk for a minute here, that's just like a huge relief on my mental side of things. And to be honest, it's not even really that much slower than I would typically be running in the long run. So it's like this weird idea of allowing yourself to be at rest, and just the power that gives to you emotionally is like, I'm just finding it really fascinating, and it's just sort of scraping the tip of the iceberg right now. But
yeah, but I mean, on the flip side is how like much control you have to have of your ability to be objective, to be okay resting, or to acknowledging that you have to take a day, or that
and there's value there.
Here it is, yeah, and the value, and just the value behind saying, I think I need to take a day, and I'm going to take one, and here's the kicker, in that it's okay, because let me tell you what's not a rest day. What's not a rest day is choosing to take a day off and then absolutely stressing about missing it the entire day. You would have been much better off just actually going out for like a 30-minute easy run or a 30-minute spin than you would have taken the day off and then sulking and worrying about it all day long, raising your stress level, which will raise your cortisol level, probably making you actually more fatigued the next day and feeling more behind the eight ball than feeling more refreshed having taken a day that you feel like was okay. And again, like that is one of the hardest parts for triathletes to wrap their minds around, is the fact that it's okay to take those days, and that you need to communicate with, your coach or training partners or whatever, to allow yourself to show yourself a little bit of grace. Because again, like a rest day that's filled and consumed with guilt and worry, that to me, that's not a rest day. There is no relaxing there, and in order to recover, you need to relax.
No doubt, man. Relaxing. That's what I'm doing right now.
Who is? Yeah, I know it is. Who is? Speaking of relaxing, since neither one of us are racing this weekend, we're heading to Ironman Louisville. We'll be there on Friday, and then we'll obviously be posted up in the Marriott off Jefferson, selling some gear, meeting some of our podcast listeners, hanging out with our team, watching a little bit of the Kona broadcast. But then you do have the race. Do you have any predictions on who's going to win, or who do you want to win?
Who's going to win Louisville?
No, not Louisville. The World Championships. I have a couple ideas, actually, who I think is going to win Louisville, but I won't say them on air.
Really?
Yep.
Amateurs?
Yep. Yeah, amateurs. Yep.
That are going to win it. Wow, that's interesting. Yeah. I'd like to hear that off air. Maybe I can get it out of you at
bonus cast
from noon to 3 at the Marriott.
Yeah, you can squeeze it out of me there.
Okay.
Yeah, like pulp. But no,
so
who
Kona,
do you?
Now this isn't, usually.
I know it's not your thing.
No, I always go with Kienle every year.
Yeah, or Ben.
Is
Hoffman.
he even racing, or Hoffman? Is Kienle back?
Both are racing. Yeah, both are racing.
But how do you bet against Patrick Lang right now?
That's the thing. I think I haven't listened or watched like every single Bob Babbitteville interview like a lot of my good friends have, that have been sending me their predictions for the like top 3 or 5 of the men and women. I haven't watched a single one. Like he does this little Babbitteville thing where he interviews all the top pros, and I think they even made some predictions. And from what I've been hearing, that it's not going to be as hot, but it's going to be more humid than it has been the last couple of years, which is going to slow down run times. But then, this is obviously like a huge if, the forecast holds, there are going to be much higher winds and gusts on highway and the bike course. So I think that's actually going to make for an interesting day. I think one of the more interesting things I found was then their like the practice swim/swim race that they have, that Ali Brownlee like absolutely demolished the field. Now, obviously, he's coming. This is his second Ironman. He's coming from an ITU background, so he's insanely fast. But I think this is like one of the more wide open races as far as the men goes that we've had in a long time. I would love to say that I thought Kienle would win because I think he's a class act and he's always been one of my favorites. And I'd love to say I think Cody Beals is going to be in the top 3 because he, again, is like super nice guy. He's always super open about his training, and he just writes incredibly well too. And it's just super informative to be around, or not be around, but to see someone so transparent with their life and their training. And I always kind of root for people like that. If I had to put it down on paper, which I'm going to have to do right now, I'm gonna go hard here. I'm gonna go Kienle for the win, and I'm actually probably gonna shock some people here, but I'm actually gonna go Cam Wurf for second place. No one probably thinks he's going to because he traditionally doesn't do very well in heat, but I think his swim has improved. He is an absolute beast on the bike, and I think he might shock us this year. So I'm gonna go Kienle, Wurf, and Frodeno as my top 3.
Wow.
Yeah, those are all total, like, it's like. But that's like March Madness picks. I might as well close my eyes and pick women.
Any chance that Tim Don sneaks in there?
No, he's not even racing.
He's not?
No, he's not racing.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I know. But I'm sure he's doing a lot of commentating. On the women's side, it's Reef and everybody else.
I know, right?
That's just it. And I actually think there's going to be a lot more action on the 2 to 5 this year, and I don't think Lucy Charles is going to be on the podium this year in the top 3. No, on the top 3. I think some things
busy with advertising.
Hey, it happens.
I know.
But no, I'm super excited to watch the race fold out. Is again like. The reason I love watching Kona is because it's got all the best athletes in the world. I think Ali Brownlee is actually going to make things a lot more difficult. I wouldn't be surprised if he actually wins, to be honest. I think he'll swim with the front pack, obviously, at an effort for him that's like nothing. And he'll probably shadow Frodeno for the whole bike and then see what he can do when he gets off and runs, saving some energy. So I think it's going to come down to the last 10 to 15K on the run like it always does. But there's 10 guys that could win it this year. I think it's going to be super fun to watch. And the reason I love it is because, this for triathlon, the swim won't win you the race, but it can definitely lose you the race in Kona. And that's strictly because if you don't make the front pack, or you don't come out of the water with somebody that you can ride with to catch your way up to the front, like Cam Wurf, he could definitely be 7 or 8 minutes back from the front leader. So that's going to mean a monster bike split from him if he doesn't come out of the water with Starkey or Lionel Sanders. Then they're going to have to work solo. Now, if they come out of the water together, then watch out, freight train. They will be absolutely blasting their way through the field. But yeah, anything can happen. There's always mechanicals, the humidity. You always see like one of the top 10 athletes be like, it just wasn't my day, and they pull out at like mile 30. So yeah, I think it's going to be a blast to watch. It is the deepest men's field that I can remember. And it's actually, I think, one of the deeper women's fields that I can remember. That I think Reef will win. There's no reason for us to think, or me to think, that she won't. But I think the 2 through 5 is going to be absolutely anyone's game. And I think if it is hotter and humid, and windier than that as they're predicting, then I think it is going to be an interesting show. But again, I'm super pumped to watch it. I'm excited to watch it with some of our podcast listeners and our team there at the Marriott, and it's one of my favorite weekends of the year because we're usually at Louisville either spectating or racing. Then you got this huge event the day before, and the broadcast. How they do on Facebook Live now has been actually pretty fun to watch. So yeah, I'm excited. It's gonna be a fun weekend. Fall is here. The weather's great. And in closing, if I do say so myself, I believe on my Louisville cast, I predicted a high of 72 on race day. And a low in the 50s. And right now,
you're right on it.
My Wunderground says perfectly sunny. High of 70, low of 46.
Yep.
And I mean, regardless, it looks like the weather's gonna be beautiful. So Louisville, good for you, shaking off some of the bad juju and bad vibes of the past 2 years.
Yeah, it's a little early, dude.
It is. It's a little early.
A little early. I mean, I was seeing Friday at 80, Saturday at 60 for a high.
That's just perfect weather for us to kick back, relax in our
Good
hoodies.
for us, yeah. If it's 40 for a low, I'm sure there's going to be some people like looking for tips.
Oh, if you want some tips, swing by the Marriott. I got all kinds of things you can purchase at your local Ace Hardware store that'll make your day.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, that's all I got.
How do you think Starkey's going to do out there this year? Same old kind of
top 20.
Top 20?
Maybe. It's not a race for him. I can't. I have to imagine he has to go there.
Yeah.
The dude's huge. He's just massive.
Yeah.
He's just massive, and you gotta be not light, but you have to be. You can't be carrying around that much usually. It just the heat will just rip you. So, yeah, I got to imagine he's there to fulfill sponsor obligations and obviously do the best he can and tweak things. But I think he'll be in Waco like 2 weeks later, so that'll probably be the race he's actually focused on. But hopefully he does well. He's a friend of the cast and's been on. He was a great guy and a great interviewee. And he blatantly calls out dopers, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah. Well, maybe overall, next time we can talk about the idea of moving Kona around again.
Yeah, I'm telling you, there's a lot to it. There's a lot to it. But yeah, pumped for the weekend, pumped to hang out with you, pumped to see everyone else. But yeah, again, appreciate you listening. We'll be back next Monday with the Louisville and Kona recap, I'm sure. In the meantime, if you haven't or want to again, you can always swing by our website. That's our one-stop shop. It is crushingiron.com. It's got info on all of our training packages, coaching, both individual and training plans. It's got info on our camps, swim analysis, gear, you name it, it's on there. Take a peek, check it out. And then if you have any questions, you can always email Mike at crushingiron@gmail.com. Or if you have any questions for me, C26coach@gmail.com.
That sounds great, man. I appreciate it, buddy.
Always. I'll see you Friday.
All right, man.